Have we been lied to about subwoofers?
Fancy a subwoofer, do you?
Have we all fallen for the subwoofer scam?
Oh, bodacious subwoofers, yo!
Well, I kind of feel like I have, but I'm going to approach this from both sides. The thing I've been thinking about, though, is that I've been listening to speakers professionally for almost 5 years. And I think some of us have the thought process that subwoofers are as important as refrigerators. The problem is some subwoofers are the size of refrigerators. So, do you really need a subwoofer? Well, we're going to figure that out today. So sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and let's talk about the big subwoofer propaganda scam that we've all fallen prey to. In 100% transparency, I have a subwoofer. I usually use the subwoofer. I haven't lately though. And when I realized that, I wanted to make a video about it. I kind of wanted to peel the onion. So we're going to go all the way back, talk about the history of the subwoofer, talk about when subwoofers went mainstream, why most music doesn't need a subwoofer, some challenges people don't think about when it comes to a subwoofer, some alternatives for a subwoofer, and finally, if we actually even need one. However, before we start, I want to talk about today's sponsor, Opera Browser. Big thank you to today's sponsor, Opera Browser. If you use your computer to listen to music, Opera has an incredible feature. You can control your music without interrupting your browsing and without having to listen to it through your phone. You can move the player anywhere, both inside and outside of the browser, and they have 7 different music streaming services available: Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Deezer, Tidal, and SoundCloud. This has been a game changer for me while I'm working. You can also customize how Opera Browser looks. Play with endless combinations to find your favorites and find yourself in a modern and clean work environment. You can adjust intensity, animation, sounds, colors, and more. Some of these themes also have browser sounds, which is really cool. Opera Browser also has video pop-outs. You simply detach it and move it around the screen. It's a multitasker's dream. And besides the detachable music player, the split screen feature is one of my favorites. You can open 2 documents or pages in the same browser window. No need to switch between windows. And to exit split screen mode, you just click on the 3 dots that are located at the top of the dividing bar and choose Exit. I think you're going to love Opera Browser, so give it a try. You can download it for free by clicking the link in the description. Thank you, Opera Browser, for sponsoring today's video. The subwoofer as we know it was created in 1964 by Raymond Dones. He patented the first true home subwoofer, and it could go all the way down to 15 hertz. By the late 60s, Infinity was playing around with servo subs. Outside of mastering studios or engineers' basements, subwoofers weren't really a thing. But Hollywood decided that they wanted to shake your feelings in your teeth with some bass. In 1974, a movie came out called Earthquake, and Universal and Sherwin-Vega got together and collaborated on making subwoofers for movie theaters. The seats shook, the walls rattled. Well, it was kind of the first true immersive experience for a movie. And people freaked out. They literally spilled popcorn. They literally thought there was an earthquake. It wasn't just about sound now, it was about special effect, really. It was about immersion. And the movie studios were on to something. Movies like Midway and Roller Coaster adopted it, and it was on. And the point one from like 5.1 or 7.1, that's where it all started.
Between 5.1 and 7.1 surround.
And obviously it didn't take very long for the hi-fi companies to ask themselves, how do we get people to pay for this and put it in their homes? 80s and 90s is when home subwoofers really happened. Velodyne and M&K Sound started pushing home subwoofers. In the 90s, you had Dolby Digital, THX, Jurassic Park wanting to make the cup of water shake. Sony and Yamaha plastered ads everywhere, and suddenly a subwoofer was mandatory. But here's the thing. Music, up to that point, really never needed a subwoofer. All right, human hearing goes from 20 hertz all the way up to 20,000 hertz. For the most part. It's a little bit more complicated than that. But for the purpose of this video, 20 to 20. However, most instruments, well, they stop about 40 hertz. Producers even cut sub bass generally below 40 hertz for pop and rock and roll music. Why? Because most playback devices can't handle it. Jazz, folk, classic rock. Really no sub bass at all. I'm painting with broad strokes here. I get it. There will be outliers. For the most part, though, there's not a whole lot of music below 40 hertz. However, there would be new genres of music that leaned in heavily to sub bass. The takeaway is that most people's speakers are fine for most music. And the thing about it is, before we hit that bass boost button, our room is kind of already a bass boost button. Bass waves are huge, very long. 40 hertz equals a bass wave of 28 feet, which means it builds up in most rooms. It bounces, it piles up in corners. That's why sometimes you can be listening in one position, move your head, and you'll notice that the bass drops off significantly. When you add a sub, well, you're just adding more big bass waves to your room. Now, sometimes if you have a really well integrated subwoofer, it can kind of calm everything down. But let's be honest, who really integrates a subwoofer properly? Not many people. If anybody out there uses a sub to balance out room issues when it comes to bass, please put it in the comments. Tell me how difficult, how complex it was. However, even if your room was perfect, integrating a subwoofer properly is kind of like trying to teach a cat algebra. You have to worry about crossovers, where you're going to set the subwoofer to roll off on top, where you're going to set the speakers to roll off on the bottom. If you don't do that properly, well, there's issues. You also have phase issues. You have placement issues. If you do it wrong, you could have a 40 dB boost at specific frequencies. And a lot of affordable subs only have a phase switch. They don't have a variable phase dial. So even if you know what you're doing, you can't always blend that sub in properly. Only having a phase switch is like making a recipe and you either get salt or you don't get salt. And here's another crazy thing. The music formats themselves and when that music was made has something to say about this bass obsession. If you listen to vinyl records, if you know anything about bass, to get deep bass, it takes up a ton of real estate on a record. That's why it wasn't used. If you have a track that has a bunch of dynamics, it reduces the amount of tracks that you can put on the record. So all the way up to the 90s, records just didn't have a lot of sub bass. To get those low bass frequencies, that your stylus had to swing wide on your record, like Uncle Allen on karaoke night. Having a bunch of deep bass on a record could reduce the length of the record by 25 or 30%. And it wasn't because of an artist choice, it was because of physical limitations. The dynamic range on a vinyl record is 55, I think, to 60 dB. On a CD, it goes all the way up to 96 dB, so you have a lot more to deal with on a compact disc. The takeaway on that is if you have a pipe organ hitting 19 hertz, well, it's more likely to be done on a CD than it is to be done on a vinyl record. That's a long way to say for a long time, sub bass just wasn't a thing. So if the format itself doesn't need a subwoofer, why do we think we need one? In the 80s, there started to be something called car culture, car audio culture. They were all about the bass. Sub bass really became synonymous with the culture itself. And by the 90s, well, there were artists that were using sub bass a lot. Hip hop, Dr. Dre's The Chronic, Wu-Tang, 36 Chambers. Bass wasn't just an add-on anymore. It was really the ethos of the music itself. It drove the entire record. Some of my favorite bands in nu metal, especially Korn, also started using very low bass. They were using down-tuned guitars, 7-string guitars, and the bass slap is part of Korn's identity. Kick drums were also really down-tuned to adding a visceral punch to your music. So home theater definitely needed them, and now some of the music required them. And they started to become a bit of a status symbol. What about you though? Do you use a subwoofer for music? What type of music do you listen to? What are the benefits? And what was it like before you got the subwoofer? For music, not for home theater. So there is music genres that I think really require a subwoofer to enjoy properly. But I also think the subwoofer craze has been something that we've been conditioned to buy. I'll be honest, I like a subwoofer. But I also don't like my music to sound super flat. I always like a little bit of really around 80 hertz.
Right. Bass.
If it doesn't kick me in the chest, I think there's something wrong, regardless of what type of music I'm listening to. AC/DC Back in Black is a perfect example. It's really light on the bass. I like it a little bit thicker when it comes to the old bass drum. And a lot of speakers these days don't provide that. And I think it's because there's been an obsession with a flat frequency response. If you go back and you look at speakers like ADS, they had a lot of bass punch. They also weren't super neutral in their frequency response. And I think the change in design of modern speakers are one of the reasons why everyone feels like they need a sub. But a lot of the music that I grew up on, Beastie Boys, Korn, Metallica, well, it just wasn't like the music that preceded it. So a lot of this whole subwoofer thing, I think, has a lot to do with what type of music you listen to, what generation you grew up in, and just how commonplace it was. I guess the real question is, do you really need one, or do you just think that you need one? A lot of floor standing speakers can go all the way down into the 30s comfortably. Even some bookshelf speakers can go down into the 30s. Let's be honest. Every hi-fi company out there that makes speakers, for the most part, also makes subwoofers. Why? Because people love them. People buy them. They can also be super expensive, which means better margin. These are the companies I love that make subwoofers. SVS, Emotiva, RSL, but everybody makes them. Klipsch, ELAC, everybody has subwoofers. If you sell speakers, you sell subs, period. I think subs are actually a flex. I think it's something to brag about. Nobody brags about their tweeters, but if somebody comes in the house, you're like, hey, look at my 15-inch subwoofer. That's the size of a refrigerator. To me, a 15-inch subwoofer is the equivalent of a lifted truck with LEDs underneath. It's obnoxious and unnecessary. They also scare your pets. I get it though. If subs didn't sell, people wouldn't make them. I still don't think it changes the fact that most people don't need them. If you're mostly into movies with a lot of explosions, yeah, get a sub. Of course. If you're mostly into hip hop, nu metal, yes, you're probably going to need a sub to really get all of the music. But for most genres and for most of the history of recorded music, you don't need a subwoofer. And if you have access to an EQ, I really don't think you need a subwoofer. Take 60 hertz up about 4 dB, take 80 hertz up about 3, take 100 hertz up about 1 dB, and you will be shocked at how much bass is coming out of your speakers, even small ones. And if you don't listen at super high sound pressure levels, like 85 dB or above for a long period of time, I really don't think you need a subwoofer. So before you bust out the credit card and buy that $1,000 subwoofer, ask yourself this: should I just play around with some EQ for a little while? If you have a subwoofer, maybe go on a subwoofer diet for a week, turn it off. See if you miss a bunch of stuff. And I'm not saying that you are wrong if you love subwoofers. I kind of do too. I just think we should think about this a little bit differently and not think that we need a sub to enjoy our music, because you might not. But I want to hear your experience. Put it in the comments. How many subs do you have? Is it required? What type of music do you listen to? What percentage of your entertainment is movies versus music? Let me know. Tell me what your favorite sub is. If you like this video, check out the video I just did about Yamaha. It's a crazy story. I'll put that right up here. Also put another video up here, cassettes or CDs. Thank you so much for watching.